Our story begins with a young man who fell in love with a woman named Sarah. She was 6 months older, and while he was shy and clumsy with words, his brother, Marcus, was a smooth talker who always knew how to make her laugh. Naturally, it seemed Sarah's heart belonged to Marcus. That year, Marcus got into university, but since the two brothers were orphans with nothing to their name, Marcus convinced him to work in the coal mines to fund his education, promising never to forget his sacrifice. The mines paid well, but they were treacherous. Over the next 4 years, he witnessed countless accidents, and eventually, he found himself caught in one as well. The boss handed him $20,000 to settle the matter, but a few days later, Marcus claimed he had broken his leg and needed surgery. He sent the money immediately and rushed home, only to find Marcus wasn't at any of the local hospitals. He went to a neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, to ask for news. She was confused, telling him that Marcus wasn't in a hospital at all. He was actually hosting a lavish birthday party for his girlfriend at a high-end hotel downtown. Mrs. Higgins noted that the place was incredibly expensive, costing thousands of dollars, money Marcus shouldn't have had as a fresh graduate. Every cent the younger brother earned was paid for in blood and sweat, yet Marcus was throwing it away on a single dinner. The betrayal stung deeply. While he had worried about Marcus being cold or hungry, Marcus had used a fake injury to steal his life savings. Fuming, he headed straight for the hotel, and as he entered the grand lobby, a familiar, beautiful face appeared. It was Sarah, whom he hadn't seen in 4 long years. His heart nearly stopped. Sarah noticed him too and walked over quickly, calling out his name, Ryan. He managed a quiet greeting, noting how her expression shifted. A flash of joy crossed her face, only to be replaced by sudden anger. She demanded to know why he had vanished 4 years ago without a word, leaving her to search for him in vain until Marcus finally told her 2 months ago that he had gotten married. She offered a cold congratulations on his early marriage and asked why he hadn't brought his wife along. Ryan was stunned. He had been toiling in a coal mine for 4 years, not getting married. Just as he went to explain, Marcus stepped out of a private room. Marcus looked impeccable in a tailored suit, a sharp contrast to Ryan's simple, rugged clothes. A flicker of panic crossed Marcus's face before he forced a smile, asking Ryan when he'd returned and explaining they were celebrating Sarah's birthday. Marcus shot him a warning look and told Sarah to head back inside, so the brothers could speak privately. Sarah gave Ryan a harsh glare before disappearing into the room. It was then that the painful truth sank in. Marcus's girlfriend was the woman Ryan loved. His anger boiled over as he asked Marcus why he wasn't in the hospital. Marcus apologized, admitting he had lied about the injury because he simply wanted to give Sarah a birthday to remember. He looked at Ryan with a gaze full of feigned regret. Marcus promised to pay back the $20,000 eventually, treating it as a loan. When Ryan demanded to know why Marcus told Sarah he was married, Marcus hesitated before putting an arm around his shoulder, acknowledging that they both loved her. But Marcus reminded him that Sarah chose him, and then he dropped a bombshell. They had already been intimate. The words felt like a needle driven straight into Ryan's heart. Marcus explained that Sarah had been hesitant to date him because she felt guilty about Ryan dropping out of school to support them. To ease her conscience and clear the path for their relationship, Marcus told her that Ryan had already moved on and started a family. Ryan was shocked that Marcus would speak so lightly of Sarah, but Marcus just laughed. He told Ryan that he didn't understand women yet, claiming that they all act the same way, saying no when they mean yes, and then worrying about their reputation afterward. The thought that Sarah was that kind of person made Ryan's heart ache with a dull, throbbing pain. He followed Marcus back into the room, where the party was winding down and all of Sarah's classmates were gathered. A waiter brought in a cake decorated with roses, and on top sat a small red box. Marcus opened it to reveal a diamond ring, then dropped to one knee in front of Sarah, asking her to officially be his girlfriend as the crowd began to cheer. Sarah was taken aback, telling Marcus that this was supposed to be just a dinner and that the gift was far too expensive to accept. She tried to refuse, but from where Ryan stood, the scene felt like a final, crushing blow. Marcus continued his pitch, claiming that now that he had graduated, he could finally give Sarah the happiness she deserved. He added that since Ryan was already married, there was nothing left to worry about. Marcus then turned to Ryan with a forced, expectant smile, asking if his own brother wouldn't want him to be with the woman he loved. Ryan looked at Sarah, feeling the weight of his own silence. The irony was almost too much to bear. Marcus was asking for his blessing after claiming to have already slept with her. Ryan downed several glasses of wine before quietly wishing them happiness. After Sarah accepted the ring in front of everyone, the party ended. Later that night, Ryan and Sarah had to help a drunken Marcus back to their old, dilapidated family home on the outskirts of town. Once Marcus was in bed, Ryan suggested it was time to take Sarah home, but she shot him a sharp look. She argued that as Marcus's girlfriend, it was her duty to stay and care for him. She then took a jab at him, asking if his own wife didn't care for him when he was drunk. Ryan could only offer a bitter smile, knowing there was no wife, yet he said nothing. Sarah pressed further, her beautiful face inches from his, mockingly asking if he and his wife had waited until marriage to be intimate. Flustered, Ryan retreated, offering to let her sleep upstairs. Sarah refused to go upstairs, noting that Marcus had spent a fortune on her ring and deserved her devotion. When Ryan questioned if a mere ring could buy her heart, she scoffed at his lack of effort. She accused him of forgetting her entirely over the last 4 years. Ryan wanted to scream that he hadn't, that he had only cut ties and changed his number to stop himself from reaching out to her. Her image was burned into his mind, yet he couldn't explain why he had vanished or why he had supposedly become someone else's son-in-law. Sarah's frustration finally boiled over into a heated confrontation. She scolded him for his perpetual silence, demanding to know what he had really been doing for 4 years and if Marcus was lying about the marriage. Ryan remained silent, paralyzed by the situation. He told himself that since she already belonged to Marcus, the truth didn't matter anymore. Sarah eventually gave up and went upstairs, leaving Ryan to fall into a fitful sleep on the sofa. He woke up to a nightmare. The house was engulfed in flames. He managed to wake Marcus, but his brother's only instinct was to save himself, bolting out of the house and leaving Sarah behind. The structure was groaning, ready to collapse. Ryan soaked his clothes in the kitchen and charged into the inferno upstairs, finding Sarah unconscious in a room filled with thick, black smoke. As he carried her out, a burning beam slammed into his back, knocking him unconscious just as they cleared the exit. When he finally came to, the fire was out, and the house was a ruin. He saw Sarah sobbing while clinging to Marcus. When Ryan weakly asked if she was hurt, she looked at him with pure disdain, asking where he had been while Marcus was saving her life. Marcus held her tight, shamelessly promising to protect her forever, even at the cost of his own life. Ryan watched in utter disbelief as his brother took full credit for his desperate rescue. Finally snapping, Ryan shouted that he was the one who pulled her out. Sarah looked surprised for a fleeting second, but Marcus quickly cut in, accusing Ryan of running away the moment the fire started. Marcus argued that as her boyfriend, it was only natural he would be the hero, questioning why Ryan would even bother. Sarah turned her cold gaze back to Ryan, siding with Marcus's version of events. She told Ryan that he lacked the courage for such a feat, adding that if he truly cared, he wouldn't have stayed away for 4 years. She declared the matter closed, certain of who her savior was. Confronted with her questions, Ryan remained silent once again. The fire had finally allowed him to see Marcus's true colors. After the house burned down, Sarah took Marcus back to her home. Her parents initially disapproved, but hearing he was a hero who braved the flames changed everything. Because Marcus was a university graduate and a supposed savior, they finally accepted the relationship. With nowhere else to go, Ryan stayed with a neighbor, Mrs. Gable. She asked how the fire started, but he could only guess it was a short circuit, until 3 days later, when the truth emerged. While Ryan was clearing debris from the ruins, a group of people suddenly barged in. Leading them was a young woman in dark sunglasses, followed by 5 intimidating men in black suits. She marched up to him and demanded to know if he was Marcus's brother, Ryan. Ryan asked who they were and what they wanted, but the woman's voice was cold and overbearing. After he confirmed his identity, she asked if he was the one who pulled that woman from the fire, noting that even his brother hadn't dared to go back in. She mockingly asked if he was trying to steal his brother's girlfriend. Ryan's brow furrowed. He wondered how they knew what had happened. The woman gritted her teeth, cursing Sarah's luck for surviving such a massive blaze. Ryan demanded to know how they knew the details of that night. The woman laughed, revealing a chilling truth. She knew because she was the one who hired people to set the fire. Ryan was stunned, realizing he was completely powerless against someone this dangerous. She told him that if he wanted to live, he had to cooperate. She looked down at him, demanding to know where Marcus was hiding. When Ryan remained silent, she knelt and delivered a sharp slap to his face. She barked at him, asking who he thought he was to catch an attitude with her, threatening to burn the ruins all over again. She demanded Marcus's location, warning that if Ryan didn't speak, she would take her anger out on him instead. Now, Ryan was naturally stubborn. He simply tilted his head and refused to say a word. One of the thugs stepped forward, suggesting they teach the kid a lesson so he'd understand who he was dealing with. The woman waved the man back and pulled out her phone to call Marcus. She told him his brother was in her hands and that if he didn't want anything to happen, he needed to show up immediately. But before she could even finish her sentence, Marcus did something unthinkable. Marcus hung up on her. Furious, she tried to redial, only to find he had turned off his phone. She laughed bitterly at the irony of brotherly love. Since Marcus was hiding, she decided Ryan would have to serve as her punching bag instead. Ryan spat back that a heartless coward like Marcus didn't deserve to be called his brother. Surprised by his reaction, the woman, whose name was Chloe, had her men drag him inside. She explained she was Marcus's college classmate and that he had pursued her relentlessly to climb into her wealthy family. However, she eventually discovered Marcus was seeing multiple women at school, several of whom had even undergone abortions for him. Chloe was out for blood. She asked if he'd heard of the Miller Group. She was the heiress, and she wasn't about to let Marcus play with her feelings for free. Ryan hadn't realized his brother was quite that much of a scoundrel, though, on second thought, a man who uses his own brother is capable of anything. He asked what more she wanted after burning their home. Chloe glanced at him, explaining she had only meant to teach them a lesson at the restaurant. She hadn't expected them to return to the family house that night. Still, she was pragmatic. She tossed Ryan a bank card with $30,000, claiming it was more than enough to fix the ruins. To her, property damage was a simple transaction, but the blow to her pride was another matter. With the house settled, she turned back to the issue of Marcus's betrayal. She suggested that as his brother, Ryan should be the one to pay the debt. In the past, Ryan would have sacrificed everything for Marcus, but he was now beyond disappointed. He told her how he dropped out of school to work in the coal mines, nearly being buried alive just to pay for Marcus's education. Meanwhile, Marcus was using that blood money to woo women. Ryan declared that from now on, Marcus's problems were his own. They were officially strangers. Chloe wasn't convinced, arguing that since they came from the same mother, Ryan couldn't be much better than the scum he called a brother. She told him to give Marcus a message. He had until sunset tomorrow to show himself. It was his very last chance. If he didn't show, she promised that neither Marcus, Ryan, nor that woman Sarah would have a moment of peace. She patted Ryan's face, noting that since he risked his life to save Sarah, he clearly cared for her. After Chloe left, Ryan went straight to Sarah's house. Sarah opened the door with a smile that vanished the moment she saw it was him. She coldly asked why he was there. When Ryan said he was looking for Marcus, she told him Marcus was out and that he could just tell her instead. Ryan replied that this was something she couldn't handle. Since Marcus wasn't there, Ryan decided to wait for him by the lake outside the complex. As he sat on a bench, he heard footsteps behind him. Sarah's voice rang out, unpleasantly demanding to know the truth about Marcus. Ryan let out a cold, bitter laugh, wondering what rights she thought she had. Sarah glanced at Ryan, her voice sharp as she asked how much he really knew about Marcus's affairs. She noted that for the past 4 years, he had vanished from the face of the earth while they tried everything to find him, only for him to resurface as a live-in son-in-law, a fact she found utterly pathetic. She claimed to know far more about the last 4 years than he did, which made Ryan laugh in pure frustration. He asked if she had ever bothered to wonder where Marcus got the money he spent during that time, since Marcus claimed to have no news of him either. Sarah's expression clouded with sudden doubt as she realized what he was implying. Ryan told her he didn't want to dwell on the past, but if she had even a shred of trust left, she needed to leave Marcus immediately. He warned that if they didn't break up, she would inevitably be dragged down by Chloe. Sarah snapped back, asking who he thought he was to boss her around or expect her to be his puppet. She mockingly asked if he liked her just because his brother did, which caused Ryan to finally snap. In a burst of desperate courage, he shouted that he had loved her since they were children. After the words left his mouth, he felt a wave of panic, and a heavy, suffocating silence fell between them for a long time. Suddenly, Sarah cried out, asking why he hadn't told her sooner if he truly felt that way. She reminded him of the day Marcus gave her the ring. She had asked for Ryan's opinion, and he was the one who told her to say yes. It turns out, the person she had actually loved all these years was Ryan, not Marcus. She confessed she had been waiting years for him to say those words, but his constant silence had left her in the dark. Ryan stood frozen. The revelation that she loved him was a total shock. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she sobbed that it was far too late for such a confession now that she was committed to his brother. She told him she hated him for waiting until everything was ruined to speak up. As she collapsed, sobbing into her hands, Ryan felt a stabbing pain in his heart. He realized she had been waiting for him to propose that day, and he had been foolish enough to believe Marcus's lie that she already belonged to him. He stammered out apologies, his voice trembling, but Sarah only looked at him with red, angry eyes. She told him his apology wasn't for her, but for the feelings she had wasted on him. She had given him every chance for years, and this miserable situation was entirely his own creation, since they had missed their chance. She declared that the matter was closed and that from now on, she was strictly his brother's girlfriend. Ryan, desperate to clear the air, told her that he was the one who had risked his life to save her from the fire, not Marcus. Sarah gave him a cold, dismissive look that suggested she didn't believe a word of it. She laughed bitterly, asking why she should believe a man who had abandoned his own life to become someone else's servant. To be honest, her resentment was deeper than he had imagined. She asked if he ever thought of her while he was off living his own life, and accused him of being a hypocrite for claiming to love her now. She wondered aloud if one wife wasn't enough for him, accusing him of trying to toy with her emotions. Ryan was stunned as she called him a fake and a disappointment. She told him that even if she weren't with Marcus, she would never be with him, and that from this moment on, she only felt hatred. Ryan realized Marcus had known about Sarah's feelings and used a fake marriage story to keep them apart. Despite the misunderstanding, Ryan couldn't just stand by, so he tried one last time to warn her. He told her that Marcus was the real deceiver and that she was just one of many women in his life. Sarah's response was a sharp slap across his face. Gritting her teeth, she told him she wouldn't allow him to slander Marcus, claiming she knew Marcus's character far better than he did. She called Ryan the true scoundrel, leaving his face stinging and his heart aching even more. Just then, Marcus returned. Seeing Sarah in tears, he immediately demanded to know if Ryan had been bullying her. He put on a grand show, declaring that while Ryan was his brother, Sarah was the woman he would protect with his life. He threatened Ryan, telling him not to talk nonsense, or he would forget their family ties entirely. This display of bravado was, of course, a calculated move to reassure Sarah and keep her on his side. Ryan looked at his brother, realizing the depth of the manipulation. Ryan warned him that he should go find Chloe before things got worse, but Marcus played dumb, claiming he didn't even know who Chloe was. He accused Ryan of making up stories just to drive Sarah away, but insisted that Sarah was too smart to be fooled by such obvious lies. He turned to Sarah, begging her to trust him. He swore he had no idea who Chloe was, and Sarah smiled, telling him that if she didn't have that much trust in him, she wouldn't be his girlfriend. Marcus, looking smug and triumphant, led Sarah away. However, as night fell, the situation took a dark turn when two of Chloe's men intercepted Ryan. They brought him to a secluded villa in the suburbs where Chloe was waiting in a card room, the birthmark near her eye prominent in the dim light. She slammed the table, demanding to know why Marcus hadn't come to see her yet. She was furious, convinced that Marcus thought he could actually hide from her. One of her thugs interrupted, reporting that they had finally located the pair and were bringing Sarah along as well. Ryan's heart sank at the news that Sarah had been caught in the crossfire. Chloe walked up to him, noting that if he hadn't led the way yesterday, she might not have found their hiding spot so quickly. Ryan realized with horror that he had been followed the previous day. He quickly tried to defend Sarah, telling Chloe that she knew nothing about Marcus's past and shouldn't be treated as a third party. But in Chloe's world, as we are beginning to see, innocence is rarely a shield against her anger. Chloe cut him off instantly, telling him to shut up because even mentioning Sarah made her blood boil. She threatened to have his tongue cut out if he spoke another word, and 10 minutes later, Marcus and Sarah were dragged into the room. Chloe immediately lunged at Marcus, hitting and kicking him in a blind rage. Marcus tried to resist, but was quickly slammed to the ground by her thugs. Sarah, pale with terror, cried out for them to stop and threatened to call the police. Chloe gave her a cold, calculating look, noting that she was indeed quite lovely. No wonder a bastard like Marcus would betray her. She warned that crossing her would come with a heavy price. Marcus, desperate now, turned to Sarah and claimed he had only dated Chloe for a short time before realizing they weren't a match. He insisted that Sarah was his only true love, just as Chloe grabbed a heavy glass ashtray to hurl at her. A guard caught her arm, but Chloe just sneered, saying she could afford to pay for whatever damage she caused. She turned back to Marcus, making it clear that he didn't dump her. She was the one discarding him. To be honest, she felt he wasn't even fit to carry her bags. But since he had successfully provoked her, she decided to let him watch as Sarah was destroyed right before his eyes. Chloe looked at her thugs and told them to enjoy themselves with Sarah that night, though she advised them to be gentle enough to keep her alive. The men's eyes lit up as they began dragging the struggling Sarah toward a back room. Marcus collapsed, clutching Chloe's legs and begging for mercy, promising to do anything she asked if she would just let Sarah go. Anything at all. Chloe's voice was like ice as she told him that if he sacrificed his own arm, she might consider sparing the girl. Marcus froze, his face turning ashen as he realized the weight of the choice. Chloe kicked him away, laughing because she knew he was too much of a coward to actually do it. As Sarah was being hauled away, Ryan stepped forward and pulled out the bank card, offering the $200,000 back if Chloe would just let Sarah go. Chloe stared him down, unimpressed, noting that she certainly wasn't hurting for money. Ryan pleaded with her, arguing that Sarah was innocent in all this. Chloe watched him for a few seconds before offering the same deal, an arm for Sarah's safety. She mocked him, assuming he was just as spineless as his brother. And for a moment, looking at the heavy furniture in the room, Ryan felt a wave of genuine terror. But then, he spoke up loudly, agreeing to the deal as long as she kept her word. Chloe looked surprised, but signaled her men. Two thugs stepped forward, pinning Ryan's right hand to the table, while another raised a heavy wooden stool high into the air. The thug warned him that one blow would ruin his arm forever, questioning why he'd play the hero for his brother's woman. Ryan was drenched in a cold sweat, his body tensed for the impact. Then came a sickening thud, followed by a scream of pure agony. Ryan snapped his eyes open to see Marcus clutching his own shattered hand, his face contorted in pain. Chloe declared their debt settled and told Marcus never to provoke her again. She tossed some medical expenses on the floor and ordered them all to leave. When Sarah saw Marcus's mangled hand, she broke down in tears, clearly believing he had sacrificed himself to save her. In reality, Marcus had simply been too slow to move when the stool swung toward him. Watching her heart break for his brother, Ryan secretly wished it had been his own arm that broke. Sarah rushed Marcus to the hospital, and despite the bitterness in his heart, Ryan followed them. By the next morning, Marcus had been moved to a general ward with multiple fractures. But when Ryan walked in to check on him, Marcus suddenly turned on him, asking why he had tried to ruin them. Sarah looked on in confusion as Marcus accused Ryan of being a traitor. He pointed out the bank card Chloe had given Ryan, claiming it was payment for selling them out. He told Sarah that since Chloe had never met her, Ryan must have been the one who led the thugs to their hiding spot. Marcus put on a masterful performance, claiming Ryan was trying to destroy what he couldn't have. He shouted that if he hadn't sacrificed his hand, Sarah would have been ruined by those thugs. He called Ryan's heart malicious and ordered him to get out and never return. Ryan was stunned by the sheer audacity of the lie. Sarah turned to him with a cold, piercing gaze, asking if it was true that he took money from that woman. Marcus urged her to search him, insisting he had heard Ryan admit the money came from Chloe the night before. At those words, Sarah lost all control. With eyes red from crying, she screamed at Ryan, asking if this was his twisted way of showing he loved her. She called him a heartless, ungrateful bastard and told him to get out of her sight forever. Ryan tried to explain, but Sarah was too hysterical to listen, and Marcus kept fueling the fire. She treated Ryan like a mortal enemy, physically shoving and kicking him out of the hospital room. Ryan felt a surge of hot anger. Why did she trust Marcus so blindly, while doubting him at every turn? He had risked his life in a fire for her and had been willing to lose an arm for her safety, yet none of it mattered compared to Marcus's lies. He reached a point of total disillusionment. If she chose to believe Marcus so completely, perhaps there was nothing left to save. If she wanted to believe Marcus was the hero, Ryan decided he would let her. He walked out of the hospital, where a luxury car pulled up and Chloe beckoned him to get inside. "Where are we going?" he asked, hesitant. Chloe gave him a half-smile, noting that while she had a birthmark on her face, her wealth ensured she never lacked for male company. Ryan asked why she had dragged him into her feud with Marcus, especially since Marcus was now framing him as a traitor. Chloe simply shrugged, indifferent to the lies of a man like that. Ryan didn't care about Marcus, but Sarah's opinion of him stung. He tossed the bank card back into the car, but Chloe called him a fool for throwing away $200,000. She insisted it wasn't a bribe, but compensation for his troubles. Ryan told her he just wanted her to leave him alone. Taking money from the wealthy often came with a hidden price. He decided to rely on his own savings to find work and eventually fix his house. After several days of being rejected for jobs due to his lack of a degree, he hit a wall. That afternoon, he ran into his childhood friend, a man everyone called Fatty. Over skewers and beer, Fatty suggested that if the city was too hard, they should start a business together. Fatty had the skills, but no capital, and as luck would have it, the stall owner nearby was looking to sell. In a moment of alcohol-fueled ambition, they agreed to buy the stall. Ryan provided the funds while Fatty provided the labor, and 10 days later, their new shop officially opened. Business was booming, and even their neighbor, Mrs. Miller, came by to help. But the peace didn't last long. A champagne-colored BMW pulled up, and Sarah and Marcus stepped out. Marcus immediately pointed at the shop, claiming this was proof Ryan had taken Chloe's money. Fatty tried to greet them, but Ryan told him to keep working and ignore them. Marcus called out to him anyway, his voice cold as he brought up the matter of the old house. Marcus argued that since the house was a ruin, they should sell it to a developer. Ryan flatly refused. It was the only thing their parents had left them, but Marcus didn't care. As the eldest, Marcus claimed he had the final say and offered to split the $400,000 payout. He acted as though he were being generous despite Ryan's supposed betrayal. Ryan snapped, telling him that as long as he breathed, no one would touch that house. When Sarah tried to intervene, Ryan told her to shut up. She wasn't even family yet. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her, leaving Sarah pale and speechless. Marcus then pivoted, suggesting he would simply sell his half of the property instead. Ryan was incensed that a university graduate like Marcus would resort to selling his heritage. He mocked Marcus, suggesting he should just live off Sarah's family since she was so easily fooled. Sarah flared up at the insult, while Marcus insisted he was with her for love, not money. He claimed he would provide for her through his own hard work, unlike Ryan. He accused Ryan of selling his soul to Chloe just to open a barbecue stall. Ryan could only laugh at the irony, while Mrs. Miller and Fatty rushed over to play peacemakers. Mrs. Miller suggested they discuss the house later and invited the couple to eat since it was opening day. Fatty, ever the optimist, offered them a meal on the house. Marcus and Sarah stayed, but the atmosphere remained thick with tension. As Fatty poured tea, Marcus began whispering warnings about how Ryan was the type of man who would sell out anyone for cash. Marcus continued to whisper his warnings, telling Fatty that doing business with a man who betrays his own family requires extra caution, lest he be sold out next. Ryan felt his anger rising, but Mrs. Miller signaled him to stay calm, while Fatty scratched his head, insisting that he and Ryan had grown up together and he wasn't that kind of person. Marcus's face darkened as he remarked that people change for the worse, and Sarah added coldly that one must always be on guard against others. As evening fell, a new group of customers arrived at the stall. They were a group of 7 or 8 young men whose conversation revealed they were in the used car business, a crowd that is often difficult to handle. Ryan tried to serve them cautiously, but trouble found them anyway when a bald man in the group reached out and touched Mrs. Miller inappropriately as she served their food. Mrs. Miller reacted instinctively with a sharp slap, and in an instant, the men flipped the tables and smashed the benches, threatening to drag her away. Ryan tried to de-escalate with kind words, but they weren't interested in talk and prepared to get violent. Seeing this, Marcus quickly grabbed Sarah and tried to flee, terrified of being involved. Sarah hesitated, reminding Marcus that they had known Mrs. Miller since childhood and couldn't just let these thugs run wild. Marcus pulled her back, hissing at her to keep her voice down so they wouldn't be heard, explaining that these used car dealers were essentially criminals. He claimed they were just thugs hiding behind a legal veneer and that this was none of their business. Marcus then scoffed that if Ryan took Chloe's money to start a business, he should have known that running a shop means dealing with all sorts of dangerous people, and to survive, one needs connections in both worlds. He even suggested that seeing the shop destroyed was a fitting punishment since the startup capital was tainted money. Sarah looked at Ryan with a complex expression, but Marcus cut her off, asking if she had forgotten how his own hand had been injured because of Ryan's supposed actions. He argued that if Ryan hadn't sold them out, they never would have fallen into Chloe's hands, and Sarah wouldn't have been burdened. Hearing this, Sarah's eyes turned cold, and she turned toward their car, but at a moment, a fleet of luxury vehicles pulled up to the curb. A dozen young socialites stepped out, led by Chloe herself in the most expensive car of the lot. Chloe took off her sunglasses, surveyed the wreckage of the stall, and immediately asked Ryan what had happened and who was responsible. She then turned her gaze toward Marcus and Sarah. Marcus tensed up instantly, stammering that it wasn't him, while Chloe gave a cold snort, knowing he wouldn't have the nerve. She walked straight toward the bald man and his group, her voice sharp and commanding as she asked if they were the ones who had trashed the place. The used car dealers, seeing her entourage, realized she was someone important but tried to stand their ground. The bald man sullenly warned her not to interfere, claiming their boss was a man named Jack whom she surely must have heard of, but before he could finish, Chloe silenced him with a resounding slap. She told him he should instead ask his boss if he's heard of the Chloe group, her sheer aura completely suppressing the thugs. To be honest, Ryan was stunned. He hadn't expected a wealthy heiress to face down street thugs without showing a hint of fear. Chloe then announced to everyone present that Ryan was her man and that anyone who crossed him was crossing her. The crowd was speechless, and Ryan quickly tried to protest, asking her not to say such misleading things in public. He was grateful, certainly, but he didn't want the facts twisted. Chloe simply smiled, and before he could react, she pinched his chin and declared firmly that from this moment on, he belonged to her, and she would protect him from anyone who dared to bully him. Ryan never dreamed he would be teased like this. His face turned red as fire as he scrambled backward. Marcus watched with a look of pure resentment and malice, while Sarah bit her lip, giving Ryan a look of deep complication and disdain before turning away. The bald man finally lost his nerve and began stammering apologies. Chloe glanced at him coldly, noting that while she knew his boss had a dark history, she wasn't afraid of anyone who played dirty. Seeing their submissive attitude, she decided to let them go, provided they paid full price for everything they broke. The bald man agreed immediately, and though Ryan didn't want to calculate the bill to avoid owing Chloe a favor, the man threw down $2,000 anyway. After apologizing to Mrs. Miller, the thugs fled in a panic. Mrs. Miller came over to thank Chloe, noting that things would have ended much worse without her intervention, but Chloe graciously replied that she and Ryan were very close, so his problems were her problems. Chloe gave Ryan a knowing look that made him look away, unable to guess her true motives. Fatty, ever the optimist, laughed and asked Ryan why he'd never mentioned knowing such a powerful lady, noting that with her protection, the shop would surely be safe. Chloe grandly told them that if they ever had trouble, they should just use her name, as people on both sides of the law respected her. From that day on, she made a habit of bringing her wealthy friends to the stall every day to support the business. We see a dozen luxury cars parked outside the stall, a sight that is, to be honest, quite jarring. Ryan knew these socialites didn't care for street food. They were only spending thousands of dollars a day to please Chloe. He wanted to make money, but as time passed, he felt increasingly uneasy about this arrangement. They were practically strangers, so he couldn't help but wonder why she was helping him so much. A few days later, unable to hold back his questions any longer, he decided he had to ask her. That evening, business was brisk as usual when Marcus and Sarah arrived once again. Ryan assumed they were there to eat, but Marcus called him over with a sharp tone. Getting straight to the point, Marcus announced he had sold the family house for $400,000, and they would split it equally. He tossed a bank card onto the table, claiming he wouldn't owe Ryan a penny. The sight of the card made Ryan snap. He lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the collar with a clenched fist. Sarah rushed to intervene, but Marcus told her to let Ryan hit him, sneering that Ryan wouldn't dare now that he had found a powerful backer in the Chloe group. Sarah looked at Ryan with disdain, warning him not to act so recklessly just because he had someone protecting him. She explained that she had looked into it. The house needed at least $200,000 in repairs, and even then, it would only sell for $500,000 at most. She argued that getting $400,000 now was a rare opportunity and that Marcus was being more than fair. Despite what Ryan had supposedly done to him, Marcus wasn't shortchanging him, yet Ryan still wasn't satisfied. But to Ryan, that house wasn't just property. It was his parents' legacy and his only connection to home. With that connection now severed, Ryan's anger boiled over and he landed a heavy punch right on Marcus's face. Marcus, who lacked Ryan's strength from years of manual labor, was knocked straight to the ground. Sarah shoved Ryan away to help Marcus up, calling Ryan a complete and utter scoundrel. Marcus played the victim, telling Sarah not to stop Ryan and daring his brother to either kill him or cripple him right there. This only fueled Ryan's rage, but Fatty quickly pulled him back, noting that the customers were all watching. As Marcus left, he threw out a final, desperate threat. He warned Ryan that if anything happened to him in the future, everyone would know who to blame. Sarah pushed Marcus into the car, calling Ryan insane and beyond reason before driving away. However, not long after, the car returned to the curb. Sarah got out alone and stood by the roadside, prompting Ryan to walk over to her. She immediately asked him if he didn't think he was going too far, pointing out that he and Marcus were blood brothers. She claimed that despite Ryan's betrayals, Marcus still cared about their bond, while Ryan only sought to destroy it. She sighed, saying she never expected him to change so much in just 4 years, becoming someone who would do anything for profit. She asked him if money was truly that important to him. She acknowledged their family had been struggling, but at least the brothers used to be united. now that they were enemies. She asked if this was truly the result he wanted, warning him that one day he would regret it. Ryan scoffed, asking if she was there to lecture him on morality or simply to defend her lover. He told her she had no right to lecture him when she couldn't even manage her own man. Sarah paused, demanding to know exactly what Marcus had ever done to wrong him. Ryan looked at her and asked if she would even believe the truth if he told her. He asked if she would believe that he was the one who actually saved her from the fire that day. He asked if she would believe he never sold them out, or that he had agreed to let Chloe take his arm just to ensure her safety. In her eyes, he noted, Marcus was always the saint while he was the villain. For a few seconds, her expression shifted from shock to deep thought. Ultimately, her face turned cold again as she admitted she wanted to believe him, but the facts told a different story. She reminded him that when she woke up after the fire, she was in Marcus's arms while Ryan was still unconscious. How, she asked, could an unconscious man save anyone? She pointed out that while he claimed Chloe released her because of him, Marcus was the one who ended up injured while Ryan didn't lose a single hair. Ryan finally snapped, telling her to just consider him the villain if it made her happy. He reminded her that she had said she never wanted to see him again. He shouted that he didn't want to see her either and told her to stop bothering him. As they stood there in a heated standoff, Chloe arrived with her entourage. She sent her friends inside but shot a sharp look at Sarah, asking Ryan what she wanted with him. Chloe warned Ryan that since he was her man, he had better not do anything behind her back or his fate would be worse than Marcus's. Sarah laughed coldly, asking Chloe if she had even bothered to ask if her man was married. Chloe froze, her gaze snapping toward Ryan. She demanded to know if he was married, while Sarah twisted the knife, asking if Ryan still seemed so honest and simple now. Sarah added that Ryan had even claimed to love her and mockingly wished them happiness if Chloe didn't mind him being a married man. She then declared this was the last time she would ever seek him out. After Sarah drove off, Chloe grabbed Ryan by the ear and marched him inside, while everyone watched with strange expressions. Once they were in a private room, she let go and kicked him in the leg, demanding that he tell her the truth immediately. Was he actually married? Chloe yanked off her sunglasses and sat down in a huff, warning Ryan that if he dared to hide the truth, his fate would be quite miserable. Ryan simply asked what his marital status had to do with her. Chloe slammed the table, declaring that if he were married, it would ruin her entire plan. Ryan asked what she was plotting now, but she insisted he answer her first. He sighed and shook his head, denying he was married. Chloe frowned, mentioning that little sweetheart Sarah had said otherwise. Ryan explained it was all part of Marcus's scheme, which led Chloe to a sudden realization. She surmised that Marcus had lied to Sarah about the marriage just to keep her for himself, and that Ryan's entire feud with his brother revolved around this girl. Ryan told Chloe that as a socialite, she shouldn't use such mocking nicknames, defending Sarah as merely a victim of Marcus's lies. Chloe laughed at that. She teased him for being so protective when Sarah clearly only had eyes for Marcus. She called Ryan a sweetheart himself for being so naive. The word stung because it was true. Ryan realized he was acting like a fool, constantly looking out for a woman who saw him as a villain. Feeling frustrated, Ryan looked at Chloe and told her that she and her friends should stop coming to his stall. He knew they were only spending money because of her, and he didn't feel right taking it. Chloe countered that they were just customers, and if they wanted to spend money, he shouldn't feel uneasy. Ryan told her to be direct about what she wanted from him, though he warned his abilities were limited. Chloe sat closer, staring at him with a playful smile, and told him she wasn't looking for a favor. What she wanted, quite simply, was for Ryan to become her boyfriend. Ryan stood up abruptly, his face a mask of pure disbelief. Chloe asked why he was so agitated, wondering if he, like Marcus, was shallow enough to be put off by the birthmark on her neck. She called him visionless, suggesting he was just as much of a sweetheart as his brother. Ryan insisted he simply wasn't a match for someone of her status, but Chloe didn't buy it, accusing him of being insincere. She pressed him again to be her boyfriend, promising that she could provide anything money could buy. Ryan asked her if she truly believed that money could buy genuine affection. Chloe admitted it couldn't, so Ryan asked why she was forcing this arrangement when she knew his heart belonged to someone else. Chloe scoffed, wondering what was so special about Sarah. To her, Sarah was just a bit prettier, and that was only because of Chloe's own birthmark. She warned that if she chose to, she could easily crush Sarah's family and their medicinal herb business. In this city, Chloe noted, one word from her could leave the entire family with nothing. It was a cold reminder of the power she held, and Ryan didn't doubt her for a second. Seeing his silence, Chloe suggested he consider the benefits of being her boyfriend, as there would be no downsides for him. She then pulled out her phone and tapped the screen, handing it over to show him something important. Ryan took the device and began to read. It was a digital contract for the sale of his family's old house, listing Marcus as the seller and a man named Mr. Who as the buyer. Ryan looked at Chloe in shock, asking how she had obtained such a document. She only smiled back, leaving him to piece together a bold theory. He asked if she was the one who had actually bought his house. Chloe didn't deny it, pointing out that while the property was only worth about $80,000, she had paid a full $100,000. Naturally, the greedy Marcus hadn't hesitated to sign the contract for such a high price. Ryan was stunned. Marcus had told him the sale price was only $40,000. Looking closely at the contract, he realized Marcus had pocketed the other $60,000 for himself. That explains why his brother had been so eager to give him a fair share. It was a move born of a guilty conscience. Chloe noted that since Ryan valued the house as his parents' legacy, she was willing to make a trade. If he agreed to be her boyfriend for just 3 months, she would return the house to him entirely. It would belong to him alone, with Marcus having no claim to it whatsoever. The offer of a $100,000 house for 3 months of his time was tempting, not for the money, but for the home. Chloe told him not to be indecisive like a weak man, as hesitation never leads to greatness. She demanded a straight answer. Would he do it or not? In a moment of impulse, Ryan agreed. To his surprise, Chloe immediately walked outside and announced their relationship to everyone. Her wealthy friends instantly swarmed Ryan, treating him with the kind of warmth usually reserved for a lifelong companion. They stayed late into the night, and once they left, Fatty approached Ryan with a grin. He joked that now that Ryan had made it big, he shouldn't forget his old friends. Ryan sighed, telling him that things weren't as simple as they looked, and that he wasn't exactly on top of the world. Fatty teased him for still being distant, but Ryan just told him to get back to work. Fatty then turned serious, asking how things had gotten so bad between Ryan and Marcus. He noted that even without being told, it was obvious that Ryan had loved Sarah since they were children. The mention of Sarah brought a dull ache to Ryan's heart, and he could only offer a bitter smile in response. The next morning, just as Ryan finished his breakfast, Chloe arrived at his door. It seemed his new life as her boyfriend was beginning sooner than he expected. As his new girlfriend, Chloe wasted no time in asserting her rights, asking if Ryan had an obligation to take her shopping. Ryan reminded her that he was just a fake boyfriend, but she dismissed the distinction entirely. When he mentioned he needed to buy ingredients for his stall, she simply told him to let Fatty handle such trivial matters. She insisted his only task was to keep her happy, claiming she didn't care about the money and would happily support him herself. Ryan could only roll his eyes, but eventually, he was coerced into her convertible. Chloe sat behind the wheel, her face bare of makeup but radiating a natural, effortless confidence. A short while later, they pulled up to a high-end shopping mall, and Chloe led him straight to the menswear section on the 4th floor. Ryan found it difficult to accept her charity and tried to politely decline. Chloe just laughed, asking if there was truly nothing here he liked, to which he replied that he already had plenty to wear. Chloe looked him up and down, remarking that with his current style, no woman would give him a second glance. She told him he was being too stubborn. Since he was now her boyfriend, he had to consider her reputation. She couldn't very well take him out in public if he looked so, well, let's just say unrefined. She called out to a clerk, demanding the most expensive suits in the shop. Hearing that money was no object, the clerk beamed and rushed over with several options, inviting Ryan to try them on. Chloe waved her hand dismissively, telling the clerk not to bother with fittings and to just pack them all up. The total for just 3 outfits came to nearly $20,000, a figure that made Ryan's heart skip a beat. He whispered that it was far too expensive and a waste to put such clothes on him. Chloe shot him a side eye, asking if he really thought she was short on cash before handing over her credit card. Ryan was left speechless as they continued their excursion until his legs felt like lead. Eventually, Chloe led him to an elegant nearby cafe to rest. But peace was short-lived, as 3 young people soon walked in. It was a small world. Indeed, there stood Marcus and Sarah, accompanied by another man. The newcomer was a young man in a sharp suit, and since Ryan and Chloe were tucked away in a corner, the trio didn't notice them. Once they sat down, the man in the suit smiled, telling Marcus and Sarah they had great taste, as the apartment they had viewed had excellent lighting and a perfect layout. It appeared they were planning to buy a home together. Chloe took a sip of her coffee, noting that a house usually meant a wedding was on the horizon. The thought of them marrying left a bitter taste in Ryan's mouth. Sarah suggested they discuss it further and promised to contact the manager if they reached a decision. The manager agreed to wait for their call and took his leave. Once he was gone, Marcus turned to Sarah and asked her what she honestly thought about the apartment. Marcus mentioned that since he'd sold his old family home, he couldn't stay at her place forever. He knew she didn't mind, but he worried her parents would eventually disapprove, so he needed to solve the housing issue first. He took Sarah's hand, reminding her that her parents wanted them to finalize the marriage soon anyway. He argued that getting engaged without a house wouldn't look good to the public. Sarah smiled gently, pointing out that he only had $200,000, and she could only contribute the same. The house, after all, cost $2 million. Marcus suggested paying the down payment first and handling the rest later. He asked if she would look down on him, given her family's wealth and the fact that he didn't even own a home yet. Sarah reassured him, saying he had saved her life and she could never look down on him. To be honest, her devotion to him was almost painful to witness from a distance. She told him that since he was a recent graduate, she believed he had a bright future ahead. She offered to talk to her parents about providing the full amount for the house as a loan, which they could repay together. She felt that paying just the down payment and dealing with interest wasn't practical. Marcus feigned hesitation, but Sarah insisted they shouldn't be so formal with each other since they were getting married. She blushed, telling him that soon, everything she had would be his. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Marcus had sold the house for $1 million, but told Sarah it was only a fraction of that. By lying, he could trick Sarah's family into paying for the entire house, while he kept his secret windfall. Chloe let out a cold snort, declaring that seeing those two together made her blood boil. She told Ryan they should leave, as she didn't care to stay in a place that let just anyone walk through the doors. Marcus and Sarah finally looked over, Marcus's eyes flashing with a suppressed rage. Sarah stood up to confront her, telling Chloe they had been patient enough, but this was too much. She acknowledged that Marcus had once pursued Chloe, but insisted that was in the past, and there was no need to be so aggressive. Sarah stood her ground, but Chloe wasn't about to back down. She looked at the couple and remarked that she felt embarrassed for them. Chloe called them a perfect match, one heartless and the other completely blind. Sarah snapped back, claiming she could distinguish right from wrong perfectly well. She pointed at Ryan, noting that only days ago he claimed to love her, yet now he was already with Chloe. She asked who was truly the blind one here. Chloe's aura didn't waver for a second as she replied that the blind one was obviously Sarah. She asked if there was even a comparison to be made between Marcus and Ryan. In her eyes, Marcus wasn't even fit to tie Ryan's shoelaces, and she wasn't afraid to say it loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. Chloe gestured toward Marcus, noting how he looked like a refined scoundrel, wearing those glasses just to prove he graduated college, though his vanity and lack of character told the real story. She pointed out that while Ryan hadn't even finished high school, he was at least a man of integrity, and she liked him for it. Sarah's face turned pale with fury at the comparison. Sarah challenged her, asking exactly how Ryan was so noble and who he had ever been loyal to. Chloe let out a long, weary sigh, her eyes fixed on Marcus. Chloe's gaze made Marcus want to crawl into a hole as she revealed that back when he was pursuing her, he had used every manipulative trick in the book. She explained that Marcus had been involved with countless women, many of whom he had simply discarded. Compared to such a man, Ryan's consistent devotion to Sarah was practically saintly. Marcus frantically tried to defend himself, telling Sarah not to listen to such nonsense, but Sarah simply looked at him and told him he didn't need to explain a thing. She claimed she knew his character perfectly well after all these years. Ryan felt a sharp pang in his chest, realizing that even the truth wouldn't break Sarah's blind faith in this man. Chloe told Ryan to stop wasting his breath, noting that Sarah would never believe him even though he was the one who had actually saved her from that fire. She took Ryan's arm, deciding they had seen enough of these two. As they were pulled away, Ryan noticed a flicker of genuine doubt in Sarah's eyes for the very first time. But Marcus was a master of disguise, and the mask hadn't fully slipped yet. Shortly after leaving the cafe, they were intercepted by two large, imposing men who blocked their path. The men claimed their master wanted to see Chloe, but she wasn't interested, telling them to inform their boss, Leo, that she already had a boyfriend and to stop bothering her. Chloe clung to Ryan's arm, but the thugs merely gave him a cold, dismissive glance before attempting to take her by force. Chloe was no match for their strength and cried out for help. Ryan gritted his teeth and rushed forward, only to be kicked to the ground instantly. The man warned him to stay down if he wanted to live, but Ryan's stubborn streak took over. He lunged again, using his momentum to tackle them both and shouting for Chloe to run. He wasn't a fighter, but 4 years of hard labor had given him a surprising amount of raw power. Chloe hesitated for a second before jumping into her car and speeding off. The two men, furious, delivered a few parting kicks to Ryan before driving off in pursuit of her. Marcus and Sarah walked out of the cafe just in time to see Ryan in his disheveled state. Marcus sneered, remarking that being a kept man clearly came with a heavy price. Sarah rushed over to help Ryan up, but Marcus pulled her away, telling her not to waste her pity on someone who brought this on himself. He was clearly desperate to get her away. A few minutes later, as Ryan walked toward the main road, Chloe's convertible pulled up beside him. She thanked him profusely, realizing he had saved her from being kidnapped. She insisted on taking him to the hospital, but Ryan shook his head, claiming he was fine. Chloe smiled, asking how she could possibly repay him, perhaps with a proper dinner? She drove him to an incredibly expensive restaurant and ordered the most lavish dishes on the menu. Ryan, mindful of the cost, claimed he was full even though he had barely started. Chloe pulled out her phone to pay, but suddenly gasped, claiming her card was empty. Since she'd spent $3,000 on clothes for him, Ryan offered to cover the meal, but she just rolled her eyes and led him toward the door. At the entrance, she suddenly grabbed his hand and told him to run. Before he could react, they were bolting out the door with the restaurant staff chasing them, shouting about people eating for free and demanding they be caught. After sprinting through 2 streets, they hid in a park thicket until the pursuers gave up and left. Chloe, panting heavily, joked about whether a $1,500 meal was really worth risking their lives for, nearly exhausted from the thrill. Ryan worried they might be recognized, but Chloe revealed the restaurant owner was actually Leo, the man whose thugs they had just encountered. It turns out she didn't lack the money. She simply had no intention of giving that man a single cent. Ryan couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Chloe caught him smiling and, misinterpreting his gaze as he looked toward her, grew defensive, though Ryan was simply surprised that a wealthy socialite would pull such a stunt. She snapped that socialites are human too, and as she stood up to leave, a sudden sound made Ryan freeze in shock. Her knit cardigan had caught on a branch, and the zipper had completely given way, leaving them both stunned. A second later, a scream echoed through the park as Chloe frantically shielded herself, threatening to poke his eyes out if he kept looking. Ryan quickly turned away, and a moment later, a flushed and angry Chloe stormed out of the bushes. She warned him that even though he was her boyfriend for now, he wasn't to have any inappropriate ideas without her permission. Ryan calmly agreed, reminding her, and perhaps himself, that he was only playing a part. She took his arm again, and after seeing her off, Ryan headed back to his barbecue stall. He noticed Sarah's luxury car parked out front and wondered if Marcus was back to cause more trouble, but the waiter informed him a woman was waiting inside. As Ryan approached the private booth, he overheard his partner, Mike, defending him to Sarah. Mike insisted that Ryan wasn't the kind of person she thought he was, and that there must be a massive misunderstanding between them. Mike pointed out that Ryan clearly still cared for her, which made seeing her with Marcus even more painful. Sarah, however, dropped a bombshell, asking Mike if he knew that Ryan was already married. Mike was adamant that it was impossible, noting that they had spent every day together for the past month, and he would have known if a wife existed. He asked Sarah who had told her such a lie, and the answer, unsurprisingly, was Marcus. Sarah argued that Marcus wouldn't lie about his own brother, claiming Ryan had married into a wealthy family for money. She believed Marcus's story that Ryan only pretended to fund his education to create a rift between them. Mike countered this immediately, revealing that when he first met Ryan, Ryan had just returned from 4 years of grueling labor in a coal mine. He had nearly been buried alive in a collapse, proving his money was earned through blood and sweat. He told Sarah she had completely misjudged Ryan, and the mention of the coal mine caused her voice to falter. Just then, Ryan decided he had heard enough and made his presence known, his tone cold and dismissive. He told Sarah she wasn't welcome there and turned to leave, but she blocked his path, demanding to know the truth about the marriage. Ryan simply asked her why his marital status should matter to her at all. Pale with anger, Sarah grabbed his hand and forced his palm open, only to freeze at what she saw. Despite his recent rest, his hands were still covered in the thick, heavy calluses of a man who had spent years doing backbreaking labor. These were not the hands of a man living off a wealthy wife. With her eyes welling up, Sarah asked about his hands, and Ryan bitterly replied that this is simply the life of a man born to struggle, pulling his hand away from her touch. He told her he had no brother and no family left, only an interest in money. When she asked if he was the one who saved her from the fire, he laughed coldly, asking why a heartless man like him would ever risk his life for her. He told her to keep believing Marcus was the hero, as that suited her story better, before walking away to attend to his customers. Sarah stood there alone, her expression a fragile mask of confusion and dawning regret. Looking back, we see Sarah taking nearly 2 minutes to walk those few dozen yards. Just as she leaves, a young man at a nearby table calls for the owner. He's well-dressed, composed, and carries an unmistakable air of nobility. Ryan approaches and introduces himself. The young man looks him over while sipping water, his long, elegant fingers betraying a life of luxury, before asking if Ryan knows who he is. Ryan looks at him with genuine confusion. The man coldly informs him that Chloe is not a woman he should ever touch, and that he needs to stay far away from her, for a price, of course. It seems this is a formal warning. Ryan knows his deal with Chloe is just a 3-month transaction to get his house back, and while he now realizes he's just a shield, he intends to see the job through. Ryan calmly states that his business with Chloe is private. This makes the man, Arthur, smirk with disdain, claiming he has every right to interfere because he loves her and doubts Ryan has the strength to compete. He mocks Ryan's small barbecue stall, suggesting it doesn't earn enough to cover Chloe's pocket money, let alone support her. He tells Ryan to name a price to leave, acting with an arrogance that is truly hard to stomach. Ryan retorts that if Arthur is so wealthy, he wonders why Chloe still doesn't want to be with him. Arthur's face turns pale with rage as he slams the table, warning Ryan not to be ungrateful for his kindness. He boasts that he could shut down this stall in a minute and asks if Ryan really wants to test him. Ryan simply gives a bitter smile, but Arthur points a finger at him, giving him exactly 3 days to break things off. With a final threat of violence, Arthur kicks over a stool and struts away. Mike runs over, amazed by the man's audacity, but Ryan simply notes that he's someone they can't afford to provoke. Mike wonders if Chloe can handle him since she's their patron, but Ryan just sighs. He eventually forgets the encounter in the rush of work, until 3 nights later, the sound of crashing glass shatters the kitchen's peace. Ryan rushes out to find 20 men in black smashing the place, while customers flee in terror. Mike is ready to fight, but Ryan holds him back as the thugs announce this is just a small lesson from Arthur. They warn that if he doesn't follow orders, the consequences will be worse. After they leave and the customers scatter, Chloe arrives with her friends to find the stall in absolute shambles, demanding to know what happened. Ryan tries to brush it off, but Mike can't stay silent and tells her the shop was trashed. Chloe is furious, vowing to get justice for them, while Mike glances at Ryan, hesitating to name the culprit. Ryan doesn't want to escalate things, but Chloe presses him for a name. Her friends chime in, insisting that since he's her boyfriend, trashing his shop is a direct insult to her that cannot be ignored. Mike finally snaps and reveals that a man named Arthur ordered the hit because Ryan refused to stay away from her. Chloe's expression shifts to one of pure, teeth-gritting rage at the mention of the name. She curses Arthur for his lawlessness, but Ryan just smiles tiredly, saying he'll just accept the loss. Mike is indignant, pointing out that the situation is far from small given the threats the thugs left behind. Chloe tells Ryan not to be afraid and promises to handle it. She asks her friends to stop watching and help clean up, and after a somber effort, they close the shop early for the night. Chloe drives Ryan home, apologizing profusely for the trouble Arthur caused. Ryan reminds her that he knew he was a shield from the start. It's just a transaction where everyone gets what they need, so no apology is necessary. He assures her he'll keep his word as long as she keeps hers. Chloe admits while driving that she and Arthur have an arranged marriage from childhood, though it was never her choice. She calls him the most hypocritical person she's ever met and is desperate to break the engagement. Ryan realizes that if he'd known about the marriage, he might never have agreed to play this dangerous part. Chloe smiles brightly, telling Ryan that she chose him because he's a man of character, unlike her brother, who she describes as a greedy, ungrateful scoundrel who only cares about money and women. She asks if he wants a drink, and since Ryan is feeling quite troubled, he agrees. They head to a nearby bar where the drinks are strong. By the time he realizes he's had too much, the world is spinning. Chloe, however, remains perfectly sober and tells him she has a simple way to make Arthur call off the engagement. Her plan? They should stop pretending and make their relationship a reality, a done deal Arthur can't ignore. The idea of making things permanent makes Ryan's head throb, and he shakes it vigorously in protest. Chloe just laughs, claiming he's agreed to her plan, and after that, the alcohol takes over and his memory goes blank. The next morning, Ryan wakes up in a strange bed with Chloe sitting nearby, wearing a mischievous smirk. He feels a sense of dread and pulls back the covers, only to realize he's down to his underwear. Chloe casually remarks that he's lost his innocence, which sends Ryan into a panic. He demands to know if she's lost her mind, asking how a woman could be so reckless with her own reputation. She snaps back, telling him she's just acting, and asks if he really thinks anything happened. She grumbles that even if it had, she'd be the one losing out, but then the door suddenly swings open to reveal a hotel staff member. Standing behind the employee is a middle-aged couple. The woman looks elegant and refined, while the man radiates a cold, intimidating authority. Ryan quickly dives under the covers, staring at them in a panic. The room is a mess, and as Chloe keeps her hands playfully around Ryan's neck, he realizes how bad this looks. He sighs, telling her she's won and he'll play along. But her father's expression is already dark with fury. Her father demands to know if she stayed here with him all night, and when Chloe quietly admits she did, he raises a hand in rage. Ryan tries to intervene, desperately explaining to the parents that nothing actually happened. But Chloe cuts him off, lying to her parents that they've already been intimate. She turns to Ryan and calls him a coward, asking if he's man enough to take her to a hotel, but too afraid to admit it to her family. Ryan is speechless, wondering who actually brought him to the hotel. Her father shouts that she's disgraced the family and orders her home immediately, but Chloe hides behind her mother to avoid his wrath. Her mother looks at Ryan with a complicated expression, telling her husband that hitting Chloe won't change what's happened. He retorts that her spoiling the girl is exactly why they're in this mess with the Arthur family. Chloe shouts that everyone knows Arthur is a playboy and she'd rather marry Ryan instead. Her mother sighs, telling her that even if she hates the engagement, she shouldn't throw away her self-respect like this. Chloe heartlessly insists she just likes Ryan too much to help herself. Ryan, meanwhile, feels like crying. Somehow, in the span of one morning, the entire weight of this disaster has been placed squarely on his shoulders. Once her mother steps out, Chloe gives Ryan a triumphant grin. She warns him that when he speaks to her mother, he must insist he loves her and wants to be with her. Otherwise, he can forget about getting his house back. Ryan realizes this was her plan all along, to be caught so her parents would be forced to call off the wedding. She smiles at her own cleverness, while Ryan can only roll his eyes in sheer frustration as they head outside. They find her mother waiting under a tree. Ryan walks slowly, but Chloe pulls him forward, telling him not to be afraid. She introduces him, and Ryan nervously offers a polite greeting to the woman. The mother asks Chloe to wait in the car so she can speak with Ryan alone. Once she's gone, the woman studies him closely, asking how long they've been together and when exactly their relationship became serious. To protect his deal for the house, Ryan sticks to Chloe's script, claiming they've known each other a long time. The mother asks if he's aware of Chloe's existing engagement, and Ryan confirms that he is. The mother asks why he'd stay with her if she has a fiancé, accusing him of playing with her feelings. Ryan denies it, leading her to ask if he truly loves Chloe, to which he can only answer yes. She asks if he's ignoring Chloe's looks for some ulterior motive, her eyes seemingly piercing through his soul. Ryan, feeling a bit flustered, simply replies that Chloe isn't ugly at all. She notes their determination and admits she knows Chloe hates the engagement, but it's a family matter she can't easily change. She tells Ryan that if he's serious, he must find a way to handle Arthur himself. Ryan stays silent, knowing this is all just an act. After Chloe is taken away, she calls him later, delighted with his performance and promising him a reward the next time they meet. He asks when that will be, considering her father's rage, but she dismisses it as a temporary outburst. She expects to be free by the afternoon, so Ryan heads to his friend Jacob's place to catch up on sleep. Later at the barbecue stall, Jacob winks, asking why Ryan looks so exhausted and if he spent a special night with Chloe. He calls Ryan his idol and begs for tips on how to win over women. Ryan tells him to stop talking nonsense, worried about Chloe's reputation, but Jacob wonders if Ryan has actually fallen for her. After all, she's wealthy and attractive. It would be only natural, wouldn't it? Ryan tells himself it's just a performance, nothing more. Business is slow after the shop was trashed, so he tells Jacob to offer free meals to regulars. As he sits down for a drink, a familiar voice barks his name. It's Marcus, screaming that Ryan ruined his life by talking to Sophie. Before Ryan can react, Marcus kicks him over and lunges with a stool, forcing Ryan to scramble back and defend himself. Ryan isn't afraid of a fight, and the two brothers begin brawling in a fit of rage. Jacob rushes out to pull them apart, pleading with them to stop before they actually kill each other. Jacob asks if this is really worth it, but Marcus refuses to listen, and Ryan's expression is just as dark. Just then, Sophie's BMW pulls up to the curb, and Jacob calls out to her for help. Sophie walks over and sees both men bruised and bloodied, her teeth clenched in anger. She tells them to keep going if they want to die that badly, but Marcus immediately starts blaming Ryan for lying to her. Sophie looks at Ryan and then turns to Marcus, telling him he's the one in the wrong. She reminds him that Ryan worked for 4 years to pay for Marcus's education, yet Marcus called him a useless freeloader. Marcus is left speechless as the truth comes out. It turns out Sophie's parents heard about his behavior and decided not to help him buy a house, which is why he's taking his fury out on Ryan. Sophie explains that her parents only delayed the house. They didn't forbid the relationship, and she tells Marcus that if he's so unhappy, they should just break up. Hearing this, Marcus immediately loses his bravado. He begins desperately apologizing to Sophie, and we can see that she is no longer as submissive to him as she once was. Once she calms down, he takes her hand and promises to control his temper from now on. He tries to lead her away, saying he never wants to come back here, but Ryan stops them. Sophie is confused, while Marcus turns back with a murderous glare, asking what else Ryan could possibly want. Marcus claims he isn't afraid and would have beaten Ryan to a pulp if the others hadn't intervened. Ryan just gives a cold, mocking laugh and suggests they set a time to settle things properly. Jacob tries to play peacemaker, reminding them they are brothers and shouldn't let things get this bad. Ryan tells him to stay out of it, while Sophie watches the two brothers with a heavy heart. Sophie admits Marcus shouldn't have started the fight, but asks Ryan to let it go since he apologized. Ryan just scoffs at the idea of mercy. He's shown plenty of it, but no one has ever shown him any. Ryan asks Sophie if she has any idea how repulsive Marcus has become, treating him like a tool or a stepping stone rather than a brother. Sophie's face is pale with anger as she tells him to shut up. She tells him that if he wants to be difficult, she'll show him what that really looks like, warning him not to touch Marcus. Seeing her protection, Marcus gives Ryan a smug, provocative smirk that nearly makes Ryan explode. Jacob rushes to grab Ryan, begging him not to do anything reckless while Ryan struggles, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Sophie doesn't back down, telling Jacob to let him go so she can see exactly what he plans to do. Marcus continues to fan the flames, sneering that Ryan has changed ever since he met Chloe, becoming a heartless gold digger. He asks if money is truly that important, claiming their parents would be heartbroken to see him like this. The mention of their parents is the final straw. Ryan snaps, breaks free from Jacob, and levels Marcus with a single, powerful punch. Marcus scrambles up, ready to fight back, while Ryan clenches his fists, prepared for the worst. Sophie stomps her foot in frustration, shouting that Ryan only supported Marcus for a few years and shouldn't act like he owns him. She demands to know the exact amount Marcus owes so she can pay it back and end this once and for all. Ryan, unable to contain his temper, barks out the figure, $50,000 a year for 4 years, totaling $200,000. Sophie, equally heated, pulls a bank card from her bag and throws it at his feet, telling him the full amount is there. She tells him that from this moment on, Marcus owes him nothing and he is never to bring it up again. Marcus, however, is quick to snatch the card, claiming it's his house fund and that he'll pay Sophie back eventually. Ryan reminds him that he dropped out of school to work specifically so Marcus could graduate, yet this is the gratitude he receives. He tells Marcus that he effectively ruined his life's potential, and no amount of money can truly repay that. Marcus, showing a stunning lack of conscience, denies everything, claiming he offered to work instead and that Ryan dropped out on his own. He accuses Ryan of biting the hand that feeds him, asking if he even has a soul left. Ryan is stunned by the blatant lie but decides not to argue about the past. Instead, he asks how much the family house actually sold for. He demands to know if it was $400,000 or $1 million, causing Marcus to look visibly panicked. Marcus stammers that a burnt-out house couldn't possibly be worth $1 million, but Ryan reveals he knows the truth. Marcus pocketed $800,000 for himself. He turns to Sophie, mockingly suggesting she pay the rest of the debt if she's so generous. Sophie looks at Marcus with growing doubt, but Marcus desperately insists that Ryan is lying and that the house only fetched $400,000. Sophie tries to rationalize it, saying that for a damaged property, $400,000 sounds reasonable. Marcus nods vigorously, agreeing that Ryan is just making things up, until a familiar voice cuts through the air. It's Chloe, looking at Sophie with a pitying gaze as she calls Marcus a shameless piece of trash. She asks Marcus if he really needs to see the physical contract before he'll admit the house sold for $1 million. Without waiting for an answer, Chloe pulls out her phone to show everyone the digital contract, telling him to look closely. Marcus stares at the screen in disbelief as the truth is laid bare. He tries to tell Sophie he only did it to save for their new home, but she is devastated, telling him she never forced him to buy a house with stolen money. Marcus begins desperately begging for forgiveness, promising to hand over the remaining $300,000 to Ryan immediately. He is clever enough to realize he's caught, and tries to buy back Sophie's favor with this sudden honesty. After the transfer is made, Marcus quickly tries to pull Sophie away, wanting to escape the scene as fast as possible. We see Chloe watching them go, her heart heavy with the realization of how deep the deception went. She can't believe Sophie is still standing by him. Sophie stops and asks what else Chloe could possibly want to say, but Marcus drags her away before Chloe can speak. Chloe just shakes her head in disbelief, having never seen a woman quite so blind to a man's true nature. Jacob is left completely bewildered by the revelation. He admits to Chloe that he never imagined Marcus was the type of person to pocket the house money for himself, having previously blamed Ryan for their fallout. Now that he finally sees Marcus's true colors, Chloe pats him on the shoulder, noting that calling it a lack of character is an understatement. The man is simply a scoundrel. She then tells him not to call her Miss Chloe anymore. She suggests he call her Chloe from now on, adding with a mischievous, shy glance at Ryan that they had already shared a room the previous night. Jacob is stunned, realizing his hunch about Ryan's odd behavior earlier was correct. Jacob offers his sincere blessings, telling Chloe that Ryan is a good man who would never treat her like Marcus treated Sophie. Chloe simply smiles, telling him she knows exactly what kind of man Ryan is before sending Jacob to help a customer. Once they are alone in a private booth, Chloe pulls Ryan close and asks if his heart aches seeing Sophie defend Marcus so blindly. Ryan tries to play it cool, claiming that from now on, he and Sophie are nothing more than strangers. Chloe leans in until she is almost touching him, causing Ryan to instinctively step back. She tells him his biggest flaw is his inability to hide his emotions, as his every joy and sorrow is written clearly across his face. She acknowledges that forgetting Sophie won't happen overnight, but warns him to remember he is her boyfriend now. If he ever betrays her, she promises his fate will be far worse than whatever happens to Marcus. Ryan sighs, suggesting that since no one else is around, they can stop pretending to be a couple. Chloe, however, insists she is serious, asking if he intends to back out after they shared a room last night. When Ryan protests that nothing actually happened, Chloe huffs and points at him, claiming he lost control after drinking too much. She tells him that even if she successfully resisted his advances, the fact that he saw and touched things makes it no different from a real encounter. Ryan's face turns bright red with embarrassment and doubt, unable to remember a single thing from his supposed drunken outburst. Chloe watches him with a flirtatious gaze, telling him that as long as he treats her well, she will eventually be his. Her gaze is captivating and her lips are a vibrant red, leaving Ryan's heart racing, though he knows she is a woman far out of his league. Before he can speak, Chloe suddenly kisses him, a brief touch that sends a literal jolt through his entire body. With flushed cheeks and watery eyes, Chloe whispers that the kiss is a reward for his good performance in front of her mother. While Ryan's mind is still blank, she mentions that since she revealed the contract today, Marcus will surely figure out she was the buyer. She tells him there's no point in hiding it anymore and hands the house back to him, suggesting he find someone to renovate it so he can move back in. She reminds him, however, that he cannot back out of being her boyfriend for 3 months. The next morning, Chloe brings a contractor to inspect the property. The man notes that the fire damage is quite severe and estimates that a full renovation will cost at least $200,000. Chloe tells him not to worry about the money as long as the work is done well. After the contractor leaves to prepare materials for a start the following day, Chloe sighs with relief, glad to have finally returned the house to its rightful owner. To others, Chloe might seem like a spoiled, temperamental heiress, but Ryan feels her genuine kindness. Feeling a deep sense of gratitude, he tells her he can only pay back $500,000 for now, which is half of what she spent. He explains he will pay the rest once he earns more, handing her a bank card containing the $500,000 he received from the house sale. Chloe looks at him with a mix of surprise and curiosity, asking why he's doing this. Ryan insists that since she is giving him the house, he must repay her, even if it's only half for now. Chloe notes that it would take him years to earn that much from his barbecue stall, asking if he truly doesn't regret giving it away so easily. Ryan shakes his head with a faint smile, stating that while he isn't a perfect man, he has his principles. Chloe smiles, telling him to keep the card. She doesn't need the money and considers their deal a fair exchange. Ryan doesn't feel it's fair at all, thinking $1 million is far too much for 3 months of his time. Just then, the voices of Jacob and Sophie drift in from outside the door, signaling that their private moment is over. Jacob continues, explaining that he honestly doesn't know what happened between Ryan and Marcus. He asked Ryan once, but he wouldn't say a word, though Chloe did mention last night that Marcus wasn't even fit to be called human. He tells Sophie that Chloe and Ryan have already shared a room, so he can't call her miss anymore. Sophie's face turns pale, looking quite unwell, but she insists she's fine before finally asking if they are truly a couple. Jacob asks how it could be fake when Chloe said it herself, and we see him admit that while he used to blame Ryan for the fallout, he's starting to realize the truth was likely the other way around. He's convinced now that Marcus must have done something terrible to Ryan. Sophie tells him he's misunderstood Ryan, but then sighs, saying it doesn't matter anymore and asking Jacob not to tell Ryan she visited. Jacob promises to keep her secret and offers to walk her out, but she refuses. As Sophie leaves, she catches sight of Ryan and Chloe standing together in the yard. She pauses for a cold, lingering moment before walking away. Jacob, whom we often call Fatty, walks back inside looking utterly confused and scratching his head. Chloe gives him a knowing, slightly mocking smile and asks what that woman wanted with him, but he tries to play it cool. He claims the shop is out of ingredients and tries to make a run for it, but Chloe grabs him by the collar. She playfully shakes her fist, mentioning that her knuckles have been feeling a bit itchy lately, which makes Jacob crumble instantly. He confesses that Sophie was asking about the drama between Ryan and Marcus, but insists he didn't tell her a thing. Chloe snorts, calling Sophie a little darling who wants what she can't have, before giving Jacob a new set of instructions. She tells him that if Sophie returns, he should say she and Ryan are already intimate, so Sophie gives up for good. She even promises to set Jacob up with a wealthy socialite if he stays loyal, which has him beaming with excitement. After Jacob scurries off to work, the renovation crew arrives the next morning and begins their meticulous work. A few days of peace follow. Marcus hasn't caused trouble, and Chloe spends every spare moment helping out at the barbecue stall. To be honest, her help usually just gets in the way, but her heart is in it. A few days later, as Ryan cycles to work, he is intercepted by several tattooed thugs led by a familiar bald man who once caused a scene at the stall. They clearly aren't there for a chat. Before Ryan can turn around, he's pinned down and shoved into a van, eventually ending up at a used car dealership where a dark-skinned man in his 40s sits behind a large desk. The man wears prayer beads and fiddles with walnuts, his gaze sharp and predatory. The bald thug introduces him as the boss, Six Eyes, and tries to force Ryan to show respect, but Ryan remains stubbornly silent. The boss, Six Eyes, stands up. He's half a head shorter than Ryan, but built like a tank. He mentions he's heard Ryan has a powerful backer, the heiress of the Omni Group, and Ryan realizes he might be in for a beating. Hoping to scare them off, Ryan tells them that if they know who Chloe is, they should let him go immediately. The thugs are offended by his tone, but Six Eyes just laughs, admitting that while he can't afford to offend the Omni Group, he has a job to do. He explains that he has professional ethics to uphold for his clients. Ryan's mind immediately goes to Marcus, and he warns Six Eyes that Chloe won't let this slide if they lay a finger on him. The thugs slam the table in a show of loyalty to their boss, but Six Eyes just asks Ryan if he even wants to know who hired them. When Ryan guesses it was Marcus, Six Eyes looks genuinely surprised for a moment. He tells Ryan he's overthinking it. The person who paid for this wasn't Marcus, but Ryan's own brother, Marcus. Ryan is stunned that his own flesh and blood would do this, just as Six Eyes pulls $20,000 in cash from a drawer. Several men, armed with wrenches, burst into the room, waiting for the signal to strike. Ryan's heart races as he realizes a beating is inevitable, but Six Eyes watches him for a long 10 seconds before offering a deal. He tells Ryan to call Chloe right now to prove their relationship is real. If it is, he'll let him go. He admits he won't risk offending the Omni Group for a mere $20,000, but he needs proof that Ryan isn't just bluffing. Ryan quickly takes the opening and calls Chloe. As soon as she picks up, she jokingly asks if he misses her and suggests they get a room tonight, unaware that Ryan has her on speakerphone, causing the boss's face to pale instantly. The boss, Six Eyes, begins gesturing wildly with a forced, nervous smile, clearly terrified of the consequences. Ryan plays it cool and hangs up without mentioning the kidnapping, leading a relieved Six Eyes to dismiss his men and offer Ryan a seat with sudden, fawning respect. He knows that if Chloe found out, she'd tear his business apart, and he's genuinely grateful for Ryan's discretion. Ryan calmly notes that it was all just a misunderstanding and there's no need to escalate things. After all, sometimes the best friendships start with a little friction. Six Eyes is delighted, telling Ryan that if he ever needs a favor in this city, he only needs to ask. He boasts about his deep connections across both the legal and shadow sides of town, and Ryan nods, knowing he might actually need such an ally in the future. The boss insists it would be an honor to help, then asks Ryan to wait a moment while he makes a call. He dials a number and puts it on speaker right in front of Ryan, and a voice on the other end asks if the job has been handled yet. We recognize that voice immediately. It's Marcus. Six Eyes puts on a show, laughing as he claims that for the right price, there's nothing he can't handle in this city, confirming the job is done and asking when the remaining $10,000 will be delivered. Marcus is thrilled, praising the boss's efficiency and promising to drop off the cash within 30 minutes. After hanging up, Six Eyes shoots Ryan a sympathetic look, remarking that his brother is a real piece of work for doing something so cold-blooded. Ryan's face turns grim as a wave of fury washes over him. It's one thing to argue, but Marcus paying to have him beaten is beyond the pale. He tells Six Eyes to take the money since it's already being delivered, but admits he has no desire to see his brother right now. Six Eyes stops him, insisting he stay to watch the show. He complains that Marcus nearly ruined him by lying about Ryan's connection to the Omni Group, and he's determined to teach the man a lesson while giving Ryan some much-needed payback. A little later, a thug enters to announce that Marcus has arrived. A familiar BMW pulls into the lot, and while Marcus hops out of the passenger seat, we see Sophie is the one driving, though she surely has no idea what her boyfriend has been up to. The thugs lead Marcus into an adjacent room with orders to give him a warm welcome first. A few minutes later, Marcus's terrified screams begin to echo through the thin walls of the prefab office, sounding remarkably clear and painful. Ryan tenses up at the sound, but Six Eyes just smiles, assuring him that they're just teaching him a lesson and won't go too far. He offers Ryan a front row seat, but when Ryan declines, the boss heads out alone to greet a very confused and frightened Marcus.